Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is Deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On this show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, joint ventures, strategic alliances, real estate, affiliate and sponsorship deals, franchising, and more. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for over 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest Podcast. Let's get started. Jon Wells is a Colorado native with 25 plus years in real estate sales and investing. Jon has helped clients achieve financial success in Denver's market. Averaging $10 million in annual sales since 2010, he specializes in long-term wealth building. Jon coaches both new and experienced investors, guiding them through various investments, including single-family group homes and commercial syndications. By collaborating with top industry professionals, he ensures clients have the resources they need for successful investment decisions. Listen, impressive guy, knows the Denver area market, manages $5 million plus personal portfolio featuring sobriety and mental health group homes, earning at least this 6% plus cap, has all kinds of other syndications he's been involved in. Jon, happy to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Yeah, Corey, thanks so much. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you today. I have to admit, I'm a little gun shy and I don't do these very often, but I'm excited to be here and be on the show.
Well, listen, it's all good. Don't worry about it. The guests we have on are people who are not professional actors or anything, but they're people who know their stuff, right? And can provide value to our audience. And you're definitely one of those people. So, but before we get into all that experience you have with investing and investment real estate and working with people to do that, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because I'm guessing maybe a real estate broker and real estate investor and coach was not it, but you tell me.
No, it's a funny question. When I was about 12 years old, it was me and my dad, who was a real estate developer, big ski resort guy, and his partner's son. And we were on the streets of Telluride, downtown Telluride, trying to sell lemonade. And so we were like so far from the top and, it was just fun. We really couldn't even get customers to buy our lemonade. We couldn't figure it out. And so by the end, we were discounting our lemonade down to like 50 cents or a quarter or whatever. And it was just a fun process. But that was kind of like my first real experience with trying to do something entrepreneurial. And, it kind of grew from there. But, it's in the blood. So my dad was a real estate developer. My grandfather was a realtor / surveyor in the UK. And my uncle retired with real estate investments. So kind of in the blood.
It's really in the blood. Wow. One other question looking back, what was your first deal of any type? Maybe it was in the real estate industry when you got into that, but maybe there's something before. Who knows?
My first deal, wow. Well, that's kind of simple. Got my real estate license in 95 or earlier, was a mortgage broker for a little while. My first deal was literally a condo townhome that I was selling to my girlfriend at the time. So it's not as exciting as some, but it was my first entry and it was a big day and she was a good client. Unfortunately the relationship didn't last, but got my sale in.
But the relationship didn't fall apart because of anything wrong with the deal though.
No, it was an awesome deal. Relationship sucked, but an awesome deal.
Oh, that's funny. So listen, you've been doing this for 25 plus years. You focus on the Denver market. You have some niches, right? It's not all you do. You have some niches that you focus in. Tell us a little bit about, those niches. I think we alluded to a little bit in the bio, but give us a little more detail.
Yeah, so I found my way through the residential accumulation phase, did the fix and flips for a long time until that drove me crazy. It basically took over my life and I wasn't able to do anything else. Slept with that thing for a long time. And, my best deals were the ones that didn't sell. So I have a term that I use. It's called fix and flop. So instead of fixing and flipping, I was fixing and flopping, but they turned into incredible deals that I was able to trade into, group homes. So my mentor from 2010 has accumulated like 1,000 beds in the group home world. And I've only done, maybe 30 or 40 beds, but it's still a great living. It was really the best thing I've done since I started to buy investment real estate was getting into group homes. The operator takes care of all the headaches and you just collect rent and pay a bill. So it's as close to a triple net deal as you can do, I think.
I was about to compare it to that. I was about to say it, sounding like, on the order of a triple net. So listen, we're at 300 and I don't know which episodes this is going to be, somewhere around 370 maybe, or 65. And we've had other real estate folks on, but we've never had anybody that I'm aware of, at least, that talked about, group homes. Tell us a little bit more about that space. Why are these good tenants? Because obviously in any kind of real estate investment that's more along the lines of triple net, where you don't have to deal with anything, maybe the opposite of the fix and flip game. The tenant quality, right, is the key thing and the key risk.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you would probably call them operators in the business world. They're not a Family Dollar, Dollar General. They're not of that type of caliber, but they are an operator. And so you have to vet them, the same way that you would vet maybe a general partner or a company that you would invest in for an LP type of investment. I look at that and, started back in the 90s, learning how to get into people's finances, saving their properties from foreclosure and stuff. That's what I was doing. So I have to wear that hat, when I interview an operator. So we get into their finances. I put on my mortgage broker hat and I make sure that they're solvent. They know what they're doing. They've got some experience behind their belt. Really, the ones that I like working with the most are the ones that are getting grant money. And there's a lot of grant money out there, a lot of Medicaid, even though Medicaid's kind of a weird topic right now, with politics, but Medicaid funds a lot of the housing. They pay a lot of money, to get people either off the streets or off the bottle, getting sober and putting them in a safe environment. That's kind of what I do. But there's all types of group homes. They'll range from your standard senior living to the mental health properties that I focus on. So some are licensed, some don't require licensing at all, but they have the fair housing protection pretty much across the board because these folks are mostly disabled in some way or another.
Yeah. Do you invest in group homes that are already operating as group homes, or do you invest in real estate and then bring that in? Or yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, I'll be a broker, for owner broker of our where I have my license. We have an investment division, so he, is constantly looking for new operators, new properties. But once you have an operator that is viable with a track record, hopefully solvent and with a good business plan, then you can find properties for them, kind of customize the deal to their needs. And so in my view, it's the best of both worlds because you get a great tenant, it's a win-win. A lot of times we're giving them an option to buy as well.
Yeah.
So when we get in, we can charge a little bit higher cap rate, give them an option to buy, and then they treat it like it's their own, their own house, their own property. So the properties range from as little as, 6 bedrooms, but up to 100 bedrooms. And so those are larger deals. $10 million deals is probably about the cap size of what I've done.
Ancient history, back in the, what was it? I guess it was in the 80s, when I first started practicing law. We got into, I remember we did a bunch of public securities deals for what we were instructed back then not to ever call a nursing home. They were trying to move away from that phrasing, like senior living or senior support facility or whatever. But they were secured, like that was bigger deals, and they were securitizing, those and selling them out to the public. And I remember being involved, in those deals. And I knew, I mean, at least the economics on that bigger level that they were accumulating were very favorable for the operators of those homes. And you would think, sometimes you think that stuff that's often funded by government funding is not lucrative, but at least, at that level, the numbers were damn good.
Yeah, I mean, it's really dependent on the demand. So as long as you could fill the space, the smaller group homes I think are suffering right now. There's a lot of lobbying trying to squash the 8-bed and smaller properties or even 10-bed and smaller properties for logical reasons. The larger players don't want to have those guys taking their clients and stuff. But I think there's a demand across the board, and the right operator will have a great way to service that clientele and give them a nice home and give them a place to stay. And sometimes they'll be passing away and they'll have hospice treatment and things like that and the assisted living properties. And they create a safe place, a nice environment for people that are trying to get healthy and stay sober, for example, or get stabilized in some sort of treatment program that they're on. So for me, it's a big need for the community. There's a lot of money set aside there's even up to $1 trillion for, mental health set aside by the government. So not that we need to talk about larger tranches of government debt that we're going into, but it's out there. And so they see a need for this type of thing.
Got it. Going back for a second to so many people that I know in real estate start out in the fix and flip game. Pretty much every one of them that I know that is successful moves out of it, right? Moves into multifamily, moves into commercial, moves into retail, whatever it is. So, I'm curious because you might say, okay, the smarter people are moving out of it. Is that not a good thing to get into? Or is it like the perfect evolution? And that's why so many people do it. It's like a great way to access, learn, etc. And then you evolve. And that's just the natural evolution of people who are successful. I'm wondering your view on that.
Yeah, I mean, the fix and flip business, especially in Colorado, the margins just shrunk to the point where it wasn't worth it. We used to be able to pick up properties for 50 cents on the dollar and then sell them for a 25% profit. But anymore, you're looking at trying to make a 10% margin, and that's really not worth it. And so you're competing against builders. And I think for builders and GCs that have the financial backing, but I don't know too many builders that have a great business acumen. So that's a strange scenario where if you have a GC's license, you're going to be very competitive. If you don't have a GC's license, you're trying to do it on your own. Flying under the radar doesn't usually work. You to get shoddy work done, you end up doing it 2 or 3 times. And so for me, as much as I wanted to make that work, and as much as, all those fix and flip programs that are out there that people are making tons of money, if you're in the right market, I think you can do it. But here in Denver, the demand was way too high. So you could literally make more money just holding a property for a year and renting it out and selling it, and you'd make a bunch of money just because of the appreciation rate. So for me, it just made more sense to save, the lunacy of trying to do a flip and just settle into a portfolio that I could sit on and hold for a while.
Yeah, yeah. So that your joke about the fix and flop is you have an income producing portfolio now that also is hopefully appreciating in value over time, right?
Yeah, hopefully. The real estate market is completely, driven by interest rates. And so I think everybody at the moment is just waiting, for those rates to come down. But I don't really see the T-bill, cooperating right now, even with the rate drops. So it's going to be interesting to see, what happens, especially in the residential market. That's primarily what I do. But I think it is propped up by demand. You still have people that need to buy a home to live in. And so I think we're lucky in a sense because the residential market has been, a lot more sustainable than multifamily. Multifamily just took a dump over the last, 36 months.
Interesting. It's interesting to me, the interest rate conversation, because I remember when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, my parents had a mortgage that was in the double digits, right? It was at
Right.
a time in the 70s. They had, like, I think they had, I don't know what it was, 13, 14%, something crazy. And I know that was a long time ago. I know obviously interest rates were very low for a long time. Obviously artificially low for all kinds of reasons. Obviously, listen, want rates to come down, but rates aren't crazy high. They're just crazy high compared to what we got used to for the last decade or more,
Right.
before they went up, right?
Yeah. I think that, we're still waiting for the hit to arrive. All the, modelers, all the mathematicians and economists that I listen to, they keep saying, there's a bubble happening or we're going to have a bubble hit. I don't know what the cascade will be caused by and what kind of black swan event might be occurring, but they're right around the corner, no matter what. And you just have to decide, am I going to invest? And, real estate just seems to have a rebound effect that a lot of other assets don't. So it's a stable environment. You got to go down 5 or 10%. That takes just a few years to build that back. And hopefully you have good tenants and operators that are going to keep you afloat. I owned properties prior to the big recession in '05. We had a few holds that we were dealing with. And as unpleasant as it is to have a tenant and have to service the tenant and deal with the move ins and move outs, they keep you afloat during those, downtimes. So I think it's just so much wealth has been built in real estate. You just can't go wrong. So that's what I
Yeah.
built my career around.
Yeah. And listen, I know real estate's very local, right? And I know you get these, these people on TV, radio, or other, they make broad statements about the real estate market. And I can't tell you how many times I've had this conversation. Like, there is no such thing as the real estate market in some ways,
Sure.
right? There's residential, there's multifamily, there's commercial, there's retail in Denver and residential in Boston and commercial in LA. Or there's nothing in common. Yes, I mean, there are certain factors like higher interest rates and things like that that have impact on those sectors. But the impact on all those sectors is not necessarily the same thing. And whether there's opportunity and not opportunity, or things are overpriced or underpriced, like it's really some markets and some types of asset classes, right? You have to look at it.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people who are less sophisticated don't understand that.
Right. Well, that's how I ended up in group homes, because that was an area that it sustains an 8 to 13% cap rate, and that's just the demand and what they're willing to pay. So, even through the higher interest rate environment, you're pretty well protected. So, if you can borrow at less than the cap rate, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
So that's been our goal, is to just get these things cash flowing and up and running and stabilized.
So one of the things in your bio that I didn't specifically mention, but it talks about reallocating real estate holdings into syndications and generating 3 to 5 times equity returns. Talk to us a little bit about the syndication.
Well, I mean, the Jobs Act kind of created all this private equity. And, I've been learning, honestly, it's kind of a learning experiment that I'm on right now, considering transitioning out of the single family market, even the group home market. And just recently, and I've had a really hard time trying to find a syndication that I was comfortable with. I thought I made a great decision, and then I hired somebody to help me deploy some money. And he was like, I would never have done that deal that you're in. I wouldn't have touched it with a 10-foot pole. And my heart just sunk. And so it was a hard money fund, and it's a little bit risky, which is fine. That's my appetite for what I'll invest in. But in the grand scheme of things, I took from his advice, that I need to be a lot more conservative and protect capital. So I think hiring somebody to kind of walk you through the different scenarios. And his question to me was, how much money are you comfortable losing? And if you're going to invest 100 grand, are you comfortable losing 100 grand? Because that team could go bankrupt. They could go upside down. Something could happen outside of your control. And so it kind of made me realize, my going concern is these group homes that I have, and it is a business. And so I literally decided last night that instead of taking the sale proceeds that I'm looking at, by the end of the month and sticking into a bunch of different syndications, I'm going to pay off a mortgage. I'm going to create an owner carry for that operator at a decent cap rate and have a paid property with a ton of passive income. So I think in the grand scheme of things, you just have to be flexible and not jump into stuff that you're not familiar with. And so I think over the last 6 months, 12 months, I've done mentorships, I've done all these different things to try to get more into syndications. And not that I don't want to do them, but they're kind of nerve wracking. And I don't know if I'll sleep well by doing a bunch of them.
It's interesting for me because you're a real estate professional. You've been in the industry 25 years, and listen, it's true out there in the general business world, entrepreneurial world, in various ways. But I feel like there's so much information out there on everything nowadays with the internet, about gurus and courses and books and systems, and in real estate maybe more than almost anything. And depending upon who you listen to, you think there are people out there who are training people on fix and flip still, right? And they say it's the greatest thing in the world, right? There are people who are doing syndications, right? There are people who tell you got to be in multifamily, right? And a lot of them have these training courses and products, and they have an incentive to sell you on something. And then you got people like Dave Ramsey who says, who say you should never take on any debt and you should buy properties for cash, which of course a lot of people can't do, right? And then I hear you, who has much more experience in real estate, exploring an aspect and also still we all learn. I mean, I'm a corporate deal guy in the entrepreneurial world and deal work forever. And I still learn things from other people. And listen, most of my audience are not like brand new kids out of school, or we have some students or whatever. And most of my audience are people who have been successful in business. They're entrepreneurs. Maybe they're even investors in businesses. Some of them already invest in real estate. But, so they're smart, successful people. But I think even for those of us who consider ourselves sophisticated in some ways, there's a lot of noise out there. Like, how do you sift through it?
Oh my God. Well, it's overwhelming, honestly. And that's why I hired Pascal Wagner to help me. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's got a podcast, and I've gotten to know him pretty well. But, he's the one that said I wouldn't have touched that hard money deal with a 10-foot pole. And he kind of explained why, and the leverage was a factor, and the history was a factor, and maybe the assets under management were a factor. And for me, it's fine, because I tend to work with people that I know, and I tend to work in an environment in an area that I'm familiar with. So I've done loans before, I've done real estate before. I understand, the hard money, in my view, is a safe place to go, because they're going to lend at maybe 65 or 70% LTV. As long as the market doesn't take a 35% hit, I'll probably be fine. But for him, wasn't the right fit. And so I've got to learn to be more conservative in my approach so that I can preserve capital, so that I don't continue to, kind of roll the dice with my retirement money. As I approach retirement, I got to be a little bit more cautious. But I think what I've learned through all these programs that I've paid for, with blood, sweat, and tears, is continue to do the things that you do well and the things that you understand, and work with people that that's an attribute to you. And with your networking groups and things, is get to know the right people, whether they're going to be your mentor or your business partner. Understand who you're dealing with, because if it's just some ad that came across the screen, and it had a big number on it, for a return that you'll make sometime in the future, there's a lot of that going on, and it's easy to get mesmerized and do like a squirrel. You're just kind of looking at one deal after the next, and it's exhausting. So I've kind of reverted back just to say, I'm going to work with the people that I know, do the things that I understand, maybe at least a loud voice, an experienced voice, to comment on maybe their approach, to the amount of leverage they might use in this hard money fund. Because I'm going to go meet the CEOs on Tuesday for the second time and say, hey, what do you do if the market takes a 25% dip? And I'd be interested to see what their answers are going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. That investing advice is, if you speak to angel investors, right, the smart ones will tell you don't invest in anything on the business side that you don't understand, right? I put aside some tiny percentage of my portfolio to be my basically gambling money, right? It's like, okay, got a friend that with a robotics startup, or, AI is hot now, whatever. Okay, it's what your person said to you. That's money I can afford to lose, right? That's money that I know it's almost like I'm bringing it to a casino, but hopefully the upside's even higher. And even if the odds might be even a little worse, that's a different conversation. But outside, if you're in a position where you can have some money where it's not going to affect you if you lose it, you want to take a shot. Okay, that's great. And I will use that money to invest in things that I know nothing about, but beyond that tiny percentage, that's my play money. Like, if I don't understand it and I don't have any experience in it and I have no way to evaluate it, and certainly if I don't know the people on a venture or an angel investment on the business side, I'm not doing it. And the same thing I think makes sense on the real estate side. I mean, listen, I've made, we had right before the global financial crisis. So back in 2006, 7, before 2008 hit, we put together a couple of small real estate investment funds. Like, we raised I think it was 1.7 million on one of them and whatever. So we're not talking about huge money. And we invested some multis, and we did a couple of condo conversions. We had a couple of multis that would have done well, but there was one that we invested in up in Lynn, Massachusetts, because at the time the sort of gentrification and the renovation was moving, and it had moved out of, to, let's call it, the second circle, and it was doing really well. And this was right in that third circle where things were starting to come. And we said, oh, it's a good bet because we're getting it cheap, or we get it, whatever. There were way smarter people than me that got crushed during the global financial crisis. So I don't beat myself up too much, but things turned. It was mainly an immigrant tenant base. They had no jobs. They went back to their countries. The vacancy rate shot through the roof. And, that particular property turned into a real problem for us because we made a bet on what would happen in the future, and we were wrong. Right now, some of the other properties we did, worked out. When you're working with other people's money, it adds another layer to it, right? Because, I mean, if you don't care, whatever, but when you're like me and you have ethics and you care about the fact that you're a
Right.
steward for other people's money, it adds other pressure to it. So it's an interesting decision, this sort of, risk tolerance decision, and where you make the decision. And listen, it's cliche, but it's true. Usually where there's more risk, there's more reward. But, and you mentioned stage of life, right? Coming towards retirement, maybe,
Right.
you want to adjust that risk profile a bit, right?
Yeah, I think learning to say no, is something that, with all these flashy ads and numbers and, returns that are, coming across your screen constantly, and then followed up by all their calls, in order for you to dive into a deal, you have to obviously kind of give them all of your information, and then they're going to pursue you for the next, 6 months or whatever to get your money. I mean, it's easy just to put on the silence, put the hand up and just say, not me, not right now. But, there is the missed opportunity cost too, of how do you find the right people to invest in. I think it's more just getting to know them, going to networking groups and, interacting with them so you can see what their experience level really is. And how do you determine if people are being honest or not? That's been like the biggest challenge for me, is like, okay, well, you claim that you have 3,000 doors, but how do I verify, that you have 3,000 doors? What can I ask you that's not going to be offending? in order for me to decide whether you're investable or not. Because I want to invest with these people, I want to deploy, but right now I'm just kind of reverting back to what I know and just take time to make those decisions and not jump into stuff that you're going to end up regretting and losing sleep over, because that's not a lot of fun. Definitely not a good retirement program.
So talk to me about obviously your expertise, and experience has been mainly in the Denver surrounding markets. Talk to me a little bit about what's going on there. It's funny. I had spent some time in Denver previously. I always liked it as a city. Now a couple of years ago, I brought in a partner in my law firm who lives in Denver and surrounding area since college, at CU. So I've spent even more time there. But in any case, yeah. So what's going on? Talk about any trends or any interesting things that are happening in various aspects of the real estate market in Denver.
It's a packed question, but when we went into the recession, 08, 09, 10, things finally leveled out. I think in 13, to where things were back to normal. It took a few years, but I think Denver's got that history of, I think it's LIFO or FIFO, for last in, first out. So we're last into a recession, first out typically. I don't know if that's going to be the same, right now, because I think prices have really inflated to the point where people can't afford to live here, and that's a problem. I think you can think outside the box and figure out ways with pad split and have this scenario where you can convert a large single family home into sort of a multifamily scenario that's happening right now. So affordability is a massive problem in Denver. There's not a ton of, subsidized housing, so they don't really have anywhere to go. So there is a little bit of a homeless issue going on here. But, if I go back to all the different recessions, what's interesting is COVID created this weird kind of a little mini recession, because what happened in COVID is, all the downtown areas similar, whether it was New York or all these big cities, the downtown area just sort of became vacant. And I bought downtown right during that same time. And I thought, okay, cool. I finally could afford to buy downtown.
Yeah, yeah.
I got these group homes right in the middle of, City Park. I'm super excited. And then all of a sudden everybody was moving out, so I'm like, what am I going to do with these properties? Well, my tenant kept me alive and they're starting to rebound, but it's been 5 years. And so it was very interesting what COVID caused, but really what ended up happening during COVID, because of people leaving, is the suburbs kind of boomed. And so I think we've already gone through the recession, because that's what happens in a recession. Downtown becomes very expensive when things are going well, because people want to be downtown. Maybe there's so many amenities. You can walk to restaurants and stuff, and people want that. But other than in a recession, it's just not affordable. So we kind of created a weird false recession there. So I'm hoping, I kind of feel like we're ready for some growth in the downtown areas. So it's just going to be kind of interesting to see.
I remember during the COVID, I think it was probably 2021 and towards the end of the year. It's one of those periods where it seemed like things were getting, better, right? And we actually got on a plane, and my wife was going to Colorado. So we live mainly in Marina Del Rey these days, and we loved the lifestyle here, whatever. But during COVID, it was not a fun place, it wasn't a fun place to live. Everything was closed. We were, we don't have a lot of land here or anything like that, whatever. And, we had this thought of maybe we want, who knows what's going to happen with the world and how long this is going to go. Maybe we want to get some property. And while we were in Colorado, we looked around, we looked like up in like Longmont and, some of those places, right? And, beautiful homes and land and whatever. And then, sort of we came back in 2022, things started opening up. And then we're like, we love living on the marina 5 minutes from the beach, and we're good here. But we did look around, and I mean, there's some beautiful areas, around Denver, around Boulder, in that whole sort of area there. There's some really wonderful, places with some, I mean, Longmont, as an example, had just some beautiful homes that they had built. I mean, it wasn't cheap, but it also wasn't LA prices.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we're pretty affordable compared to LA. But the other piece to throw in there, the amount of building that has occurred, with the big tract home building and things like that, they've gone from doing a lot of spec buildings to where they kind of, now they're doing just in time, so, if somebody wants one, they'll build one. But they got away from building a glut of homes. So I think that also kind of insulates, if there is a downturn, there's still not a lot of supply in Denver. We're definitely in the middle of a hiccup, and it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable to own property right now, but I don't think it's going to last too long. I don't think it's going to last long on a local level or a national level. People just have to feel more confident it's all about consumer confidence. People aren't going to buy anything when they're not confident that the economy can support their job, that they're going to have a job tomorrow. So I'm optimistic, that as interest rates come down, 4% unemployment or 4.5% unemployment is honestly just not a real number to me. They don't count so many things. They don't count the people that are retiring. They don't count the people that gave up. They don't count the people that are living in their parents' basement. There's all these things that number doesn't include that I think it's probably a lot higher. And so the interest rates need to come down for that reason. And I think when that happens, consumer confidence will come back and everything will get back to normal.
And then in terms of like the investor opportunities in the Denver market, obviously they're tied to the consumer confidence, everything you talked about in terms of the, let's say, the residential single home buyer market. But I always sort of feel like smart investors find their way. I mean, you talk about why you're in group homes. What's happening on the investment side? I mean, you mentioned one thing. Obviously, developers are now not doing spec, right? And that's classic in a cycle, right? When things are going well, or it was like, oh, we're going to build because there's going to be all this demand, and then they pull back. And then obviously, fewer homes are coming on the market, and then it creates some more need. But anything else you're seeing in terms of real estate investment opportunities or what investors are doing in the market?
Yeah, I was at a capital raising conference, and the asset class that is really kind of interesting to me that appears to be at the bottom is office, office buildings and things. And they're projecting double digit returns in office because you're going to get a massive discount. So I think if you have the ability to pick up an office and maybe create like a share workspace or anything like that component, because the environment's going to be different no matter what. People are working from home. You're not going to get rid of that, but if you have the cojones to get into office space, probably a good buy right now. It's just, big dollars, huge buildings, high-rise buildings. A lot of them are 50% vacant still, and they're trying to get those things filled up. They're actually converting some of those into condos. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly how they're going to do it, but, that's happening. So I think that inventory will have to get gobbled up at some point. Otherwise, maybe we won't stabilize overall market, until that's figured out. But, all those loans are due. They're kicking the can down the road. Nobody wants to end up with those buildings. None of the bankers want to have to become a property manager. So whether it's multifamily or office buildings, the commercial, I think the area that is the most stable is industrial leasing, and even the retail space seems to be a little bit more vibrant throughout Denver. At least that's what that's what I learned. I'm not in that space, but that's what I'm learning.
Yeah, it's interesting with the office stuff because you're right. I mean, I've seen it so many times. I remember I had an office down on Wall Street during a stretch in the 90s where, downtown New York they had vacancies that wasn't doing well, right? It's big investment and you got to have the wherewithal to hold, whatever. But I mean, the folks that bought buildings down there at that time, I mean, we're talking about huge money, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars. A couple of years ago, I spent some time in Detroit and toured some of downtown Detroit. And obviously that had gone really, really bad. And then you had a couple of major players come in, right? There were two big developers, the guy from Rocket Mortgage and, who bought up a lot of, down now they had an advantage because they bought up buildings and then put their businesses in them that helped, so,
Yeah, owner occupied.
um,
That's
I mean, the amount of returns on those investments is just that, obviously you got to be at a certain level to be able to, or be able to put together a syndicate like that can make that kind of investment and have the wherewithal to hold because it's probably, it's not going to turn in the next year or two. You're going to need to be at least 5-10 years to turn, to be able to get out of those properties and you got to be able to cash flow them in the meantime. So interesting.
Yeah, I would imagine that the bankers are wising up to, the reality of, I've got to provide some really incredible terms for anybody that's willing to get into that space. So yeah, I think that would be an interesting play, putting some sort of syndication together in that kind of world. That kind of environment would be a really good bet right now. I have my little mainstay niche program. I'll continue to find new operators that are out there trying to open up their group home business and expand. That's what I'll probably continue to focus on, but definitely like to hear about other ideas, and getting out to these conferences kind of opened my mind to what else to do. And maybe that would be a good LP investment, but you have to look at the macros, start with the macros. And if the macros line up, then you start diving into the details. But finding the right operator, whether it's a commercial syndication in office space, or whether it's you're investing in an operator that's going to pay your rent on a group home, it's just all the same sort of vetting process. And that's what I'm learning is key, to success.
Love it. So, John, if people want to find out more about what you do, whether they're interested in talking to you about some of these investments or, obviously just on the real estate brokerage side or anything else you're doing, where should they go?
Honestly, the best way to go find me is on LinkedIn. So Jon Wells, Jon, and then Wells on LinkedIn. There's a few videos there that I've provided just to kind of walk people through, what to do, what not to do with their money. And so I'll just keep posting and get a following. Thanks for having me. It's been really fun. Enjoyed chatting with you today.
That's great. So final question I always ask on the podcast is about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom around the world for people from oppression to why I've been an entrepreneur for many decades and haven't had a boss. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
Yeah, well, I do have a happiness formula that I keep striving, to do and to build. And that is just simply being financially independent. So when I have my bills paid, I've got money to go on vacation, and it's passive. Passive income is key. And I think not just is it key to building a retirement, it's also key to building financial security during volatile times in the market. And, if you don't have passive income that's coming in, then I think you could be a little bit vulnerable. So I think, find the people that can show you how to build passive income, and I think you'll do better.
I love it. Usually I end there, but I'm going to actually ask one follow-up just because a lot of people in real estate talk about passive income, and then some people will tell you nothing is actually truly 100% passive. Just give me your last comment on that. We'll close with that.
Well, my favorite passive income, I haven't done enough of it, but I want to do more. And that's just going to be note income and even owner carry, income. So, secured by real estate, but you have literally no responsibilities other than just collecting a payment. So I love passive income.
So it's passive unless you get a default on the note, and then
it becomes a little bit more
right.
active.
But for the most part, it's passive if you do it right. Okay, got it. Great, John. Thanks for being such a great guest on the DealQuest Podcast.
Absolutely, I enjoyed it a lot. Thanks for having me, Corey.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. If you are interested in finding out more about my law firm, the services we provide to entrepreneurial and growing companies across industries all over the country, and my partner Brian Megan and I, and my amazing team, just head over to kupferlaw.com. That's kupferlaw.com. And if you want to follow more of my content, head over to my LinkedIn page where I post regularly. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.